O my Lord, save my nation, save my nation, save my nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another installment of the Islam Answers book review series. In this installment, we'll be looking at a primer in Hanafi fiqh, that is Ascent to Felicity. Alhamdulillah, once again, I'm blessed to be joined by our very own Shaykh Noor Deen Rashid. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum assalam.
So, Shaykh, if you would mind doing the honors and
Yes.
introducing the text, please.
Ascent to Felicity, the author is Imam Ash-Shurumbulali, rahimahullah ta'ala. People are probably going to know Imam Ash-Shurumbulali for Noor far more than this particular text, Ascent to Felicity. Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing that this has been translated into the English language. But yes, it's the same author as Noor Some people who have studied a little further may also know him as the author of Maraqi al-Falah, and some may even know Imdad al-Fatah and other works of Imam Shurumbulali. Imam Shurumbulali is a highly regarded scholar of the Hanafi madhab. He is from the later scholars, yani the mutaakhirun. However, I would still consider him to be a classical scholar in the sense that he is agreed upon. You see, he's not a contemporary or recent scholar that doesn't have that kind of universal acceptance. Imam Shurumbulali, rahimahullah ta'ala, is one of the agreed upon authorities in the Hanafi madhab. This is a very useful text, alhamdulillah. It's less detailed than Noor al-Idah, but it does cover more areas.
So, Sheikh, just to follow up on that, as you mentioned, he's more widely recognized for his text Noor al-Idah, but depending on people's levels and exposures, what would you recommend as a better starting point for Hanafi?
Yeah, people who haven't really studied fiqh before, or the fiqh of ibadat, I would recommend this prior to Noor al-Idah. Noor al-Idah is an excellent work, mashallah, but it does, relatively speaking, it does go into a lot of detail. And when you compare it to a standard matan like Quduri, for example, Noor al-Idah for ibadat, it does go into a lot of detail. So this might be a better starting point because you'll receive more fundamental information more swiftly. So, really gets you started, inshallah ta'ala. But yes, that would be my advice. And as I said, it's a blessing that this has now been translated into the English language. It does have a section on Aqidah as well, although I would advise people to study Aqidah Tahawiyya maybe in Aqidah, and focus on this book for fiqh, and in particular fiqh of ibadat. It is a better place to start.
So, Sheikh, in terms of fiqh works, they're very loaded in terms of a lot of jargon and technical terminology. So especially for someone who's just starting out in their studies, they're not really familiar with the Arabic language. So these terms would be very overwhelming for them. What would you recommend is the best way to navigate these terms? Yeah,
once again, because this is a matan and it's for people who are essentially at the beginning of their studies, it should really be studied with a teacher. And then, it's the job of the teacher essentially to unpack that for the student, to explain those terms in context. What does it mean when we say, oh, this is a fard of wudu as opposed to a sunnah of wudu? What does it mean when we say, oh, this is wajib in salah? Those terms, inshallah ta'ala, should be explained by the teacher. And yes, it's true that the fiqh texts, especially mutun, they do need a lot of unpacking. Now, otherwise people can really misunderstand. Sometimes there's also the issue that a shaykh has mentioned a particular ruling and given an example or a scenario and not mentioned other aspects of it. And then people can misunderstand and think, oh, he gave that as an example, so therefore he must believe that that in and of itself is halal. So there are other issues that arise when you're reading these kind of texts alone. So they really should be, especially at the beginner's level, you should really read them, study them with a credible teacher.
Shukran alaikum, Sheikh. And in terms of the benefits you get from studying these texts with a teacher, would you say it's important, is or is not important, at least in the beginning stages of studying fiqh, to focus on differences of opinion, or would it be more beneficial to at least just to lay down the foundations of what are the sound opinions?
Yeah, even our basic texts in the Hanafi madhab, they do raise ikhtilafat, and it's good for students to get used to that early on. Unfortunately, one of the problems we have many Muslims out there who don't understand the concept of ikhtilaf, difference of opinion. Now, difference of opinion, when we speak about difference of opinion, you have valid, credible ikhtilaf, differences of opinion, and then you have others that are not. And the students needs to learn, or the Muslim needs to learn early on the difference between the two and how to navigate the two. So yes, it will come up. He's not going to delve into it deeply, but ikhtilafat will come up at times, and that is important. That's an important aspect of one's study. It's also important to note that yes, all the books we've done on this series so far are classical, agreed upon texts, and it's always better to try to study texts like that rather than a contemporary text, because a contemporary book written by, a contemporary scholar does not have the same level of authority to it. It's not as authoritative. So, yes, we will say that Imam Shurumbalali, he is going to make errors at times, and certain things he might say in his book is not going to be the sound opinion. However, the vast majority of what's mentioned in the book is reflective of the soundest opinion in the madhabs, and that helps the teacher as well. Then the teacher is guided by the book too. He can focus on explaining the masail, and he can have some level of confidence, although he should research deeply before he teaches, but he can have some level of confidence that most of what's being mentioned here is sound, as can the student.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. And just one final question. On a historical level, there are a certain number of texts that are described as reflective of these soundest opinions that are transmitted within the Hanafi madhab. Is this one of them, or is it not?
This is not from the early mutun of the Hanafi madhab. It's not from those. This is, as I said, he's from the mutaakhirun, Imam Shurumbalali rahimahullah ta'ala. However, yes, what he presents here is reflective, generally speaking, of the strongest opinion. But even those early mutun, they made an attempt to present the strongest opinion in the madhab. They were not always successful. So other scholars would write commentaries on those works and say, well, actually here, the author has gone against the soundest opinion in the madhab. So this is why, especially when it comes to people teaching these sciences, they need to research deeply, and their reading has to be, and their study has to be broad. This is why fiqh, and especially Hanafi fiqh, is actually quite a difficult subject to teach. Because there's no one text you can say, right, this particular book will give you all of the sound opinions in the madhab, unless you go to the very large books. And even then, at times, other scholars will disagree. Like you have Fath al-Qadir, commentary on Al-Hidayah by Imam Ibn Humam, one of the very highly regarded scholars in the Hanafi madhab. Generally speaking, what he says is reflective of the madhab. Every now and then he'll say something, and then scholars who came afterwards, like Imam Ibn Abdin rahimahullah ta'ala, say, actually on this issue, he hasn't actually reflected the soundest opinion in the madhab. Rather, the sounder opinion is this, and he'll explain why. So it's very difficult to say there's a particular book that will give you the soundest opinion on every single issue, but there are books that are recognized to do that most of the time, and this is amongst them.
It's quite ironic from a teaching point, Sheikh, because especially in terms of fiqh, it can actually be more difficult to teach a more basic text compared to a commentary.
Absolutely, because in a commentary, the masail are going to be more thoroughly explained, whereas in a matan, that's left for the teacher to do, and then there has to be sufficient research. This is something I found again and again, that there are many people who will teach fiqh, but they have not researched it thoroughly enough, and then they will make errors. Subhanallah, it's one of the difficulties in the Hanafi madhab, and I suppose in other madhahib as well, that certain masail are only really fleshed out in the most detailed of books, and unless you study those masail from the most detailed of books, you will actually go wrong.
Jazakumullah khairan for your time, Sheikh.
Allah bless you.